we founded Trial Site towards the end of 2018, so before any pandemic. And the idea behind Trial Site is that there needs to be more easy to understand, yet as unbiased and objective as possible, summaries and easy to consume information about clinical research. I got the idea from my experience being an entrepreneur in the world of drug development and clinical trials. I launched a couple companies that were involved with the development of software to help large pharmaceutical companies better manage their global clinical trials. So the documents and the data that are involved with these extensive efforts called, clinical research,
right?
It requires software. And so I use my legal background. I'm trained as a lawyer at University of California, and applied my knowledge of administrative law to requirements, software requirements that led us to a couple different systems that have been used out in the marketplace. And so that background, Sonia, led me to the understanding that the pharmaceutical industry has trouble recruiting patients. There's so many different investigational products out there. They need doctors to become researchers or investigators, and they need patients to become subjects, participants. Yeah. Now, to do that, you need more trust. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't have the highest brand levels of trust. So the idea I had was, create a media and potentially a social network, which we've done now, that can over time bring transparency, accessibility, and hopefully more trust, so that the good things that pharmaceutical companies are doing can attract, potential patients, while those patients are more empowered by knowledge.
Could you tell me a little bit about your partnership with in El Paso, Texas? There was a organization you partnered with.
Yes.
Yeah.
So their Trial Site was approached. We wrote about a group in El Paso, a nonprofit organization called MCA, that is trying to build clinical trial infrastructure in El Paso. So that meaning get more clinics that are just health clinics involved with research, help get more doctors that are in the region working as investigators, and raising the awareness to patients about particular studies, as well as training local professionals how to become clinical research coordinators, or monitors. So that's been quite successful. Trial Site has been working with El Paso and these different groups, which include Texas Tech, University of Texas, El Paso, again, MCA, our partner, and other groups, including the local government. And now we're taking that same approach to New York City, and we're starting a project in the Bronx with the community groups over there.
It's really interesting. I wanted to just ask you, you built a successful software company. You were talking about how this software was used for clinical trials. What made you stop what you were doing and then launch Trial Site?
I think there was a real need out there. And, I had started a couple of companies. I had sold 2 of them. So I had some extra money, right, which helps. And so I figured, hey, now's the time before I get, too much older to do something that could potentially give back to more people, right? So before I was adding value for, let's say pharmaceutical companies, right? But I wanted to take my knowledge and apply it to a broader forum or audience. I had no idea how it would unfold or how big it would get, to be honest with you. But the COVID pandemic changed that, right?
Right. Could you tell me a little bit about your reach, really, globally with Trial Site News and who you're reaching every day?
The reach is significant. So, We do have a paywall, which is a subscriber service, which helps us covers the cost, some of the costs of trial site. That distorts the potential traffic because a lot of people that go to the site don't want to subscribe. Right now, the audience is up to about 2 million per month, and the reach is all over the world. It's about 55% North America, probably about 25 to 30% Europe, and then with the remainder in Asia, Australia, some in Africa, and some small amount in South America, excuse me. So it's global, but about 55% is North America, maybe 60%.
Right. And obviously you funded this yourself. You're not taking advertising money or from sponsors or.
No, I funded the whole thing, and then from the end of 2018 till August 2021, I funded the entire thing myself. Then we instituted a paywall to help me fund continuously, because we had to rebuild the software, the website. So the subscribers thankfully helped us continue. We were doing a public offering now. There's a way to go to the public for funding here in the United States, and we're doing that now. And we've raised a little money thanks to some investors. So, but it's overwhelmingly been myself keeping this thing going.
And do you think because you have ultimately that control over what's on your platform, has this given you the liberty, the freedom to have writers, well, I guess like myself and others, to investigate areas where normally, we'd get censored, or there would be no way that would get published? And I'm obviously talking specifically about COVID-19, how events unfolded, the vaccines and all of that. Do you think that it's because you have ultimate control that you're able to have that freedom?
Definitely. This time is a strange one in that, once COVID came, there was an unprecedented sort of centralization of approach, top-down communication, health communication strategy. And I can understand that. I mean, it's a pandemic. You want to make sure that the people are aligned with what your experts are saying. So I get that. I think the problem was, there were a lot of areas that were gray, and there wasn't necessarily a right or a wrong. There was unfolding science. Yet the authorities, whether it was in the United States, the FDA, CDC, NIH, as an example, and then the medical societies, whatever the government decided was the sort of standard party line, everybody would just line up, even if it was still a gray area. If you dared write about, a different interpretation that was possible, you were classified as promulgating misinformation or a conspiracy theory or things like that. And in some cases, people were, I don't agree with just being able to say anything you want. I think you have to have some responsibility, but you also have to discuss, if it's a nebulous area with the science unfolding, you need to be able to talk about that. And so the reason we were able to talk about that without being censored is because A, it's privately controlled, and B, we have built our own system, and we're not dependent on the social networks to get our information out to our audiences. Right?
I mean, what do you think about the CDC essentially sort of colluding with big tech and promoting the sort of censoring of certain tweets and things like that, how they were really sort of heavily involved with big tech in controlling the narrative that was coming out?
So there was that leak, and there was a bunch of emails. It's not clear if they were breaking the law. We have to remember that anytime we put anything out on social media, the social media own it. And those platforms, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or what have you, they're not public, okay? They have their own policies. And it's pretty clear that they reached out to the government to say, hey, guide us on, what your perspective is on, these types of messages. I think the broader problem, and it's hard to prove, but if the government has established a narrative, and there's within that narrative, there's definitive truths that in reality represent still unfolding science, then is it right to classify any other interpretation as misinformation, and then ask the social networks to then tag, flag, and deal with those messages? That's a gray area. If the government's proactively monitoring the American public, for example, and then reaching into the social networks and proactively having them define what is misinformation versus what is not, you're getting into some questionable legal territory. Okay, now we have a lawsuit that has not been announced yet, so it hasn't been filed yet. So again, I've mentioned that to you, where we're going after the Trusted News Initiative, which is a combination of media and tech, but under a different theory.
Yes, no, I'd love for you to talk a bit about that if you can, and what led you to be part of that lawsuit.
Yeah, I can briefly, it hasn't been filed yet, but I will say, shortly here, briefly, that it is us and 5 other individuals or groups, and it's against the Trusted News Initiative, which is a combination of media companies such as BBC and Washington Post and Reuters and a few others, as well as the tech giants like Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook, under a theory of antitrust, that these large media entities are using censorship to thwart competition.
Right.
Because there's an explosion of new media sites, podcasts, YouTube, Rumble. And this is concerning big media. They're losing market share.
Right. It's essentially to squash the independent media sites, which that's why it falls under antitrust when it comes to a lawsuit.
That's right. That's why our theory is under antitrust.
Yes.
Now, again, our damages in this have been the revenue that we were generating through YouTube. We were generating pretty robust revenues for a small little startup.
Yeah.
And as soon as they started censoring us for illicit reasons, I mean, they were censoring us over facts that were true. We were not incorrect. We were just presenting facts. So, but again, our main
just to tell the viewers, so this was this is Trial Site News is YouTube channel, just to and they were giving you sort of strikes. I know you get so many strikes and then you get deplatformed.
Yes, we never got deplatformed, but they would strike us and then they would shadow ban us, so our revenues would go down 80-90%.
I see. Right.
But our main platform cannot be censored because it's independent. It's our own application.
Yeah.
And so we luckily have that separate.
Yes. Do you think that the experience from essentially you're being censored, you're being shadow banned, sparked you to then kind of in a sense redesign Trial Site News's platform, bringing in new technology, sort of making it more sort of a networking site? Do you
Absolutely
think that was the catalyst?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as like any business, we want to figure out where there is value to be delivered, right?
Yes.
So what we realized, okay, so first of all, our audience exploded from 2020 to 2021. We were the only game in town. Then Substack opened up and started paying authors. So a lot of people that we developed went to Substack. Okay. And I mean, people like Steve Kirsch that developed a huge audience in Trial Site, then took his show to Substack, which we were fine with. ultimately, we have a bigger mission than, courting any individual.
Yeah.
But what we have done is we've opened up a social network, and that's starting to grow. I mean, we have already brought in one vaccine injury group that we've got a couple hundred people, I think, already on.
That's
And
fantastic. So in a way,
we're,
you're competing with Facebook, kind of, right?
we are now. So for medical research, we have spent the last months building a social network, groups, postings, all kinds of those features that we're now bringing over people that are getting censored on Facebook. So give you an example, there's one very large vaccine injured group that is planning to come on board, over 20,000 people.
Wow.
And we're going to put in a network of doctors and lawyers and other service providers that these vaccine injured persons can access. Okay.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
a lot of these folks can't announce it because doctors get censored themselves. They threaten to lose their license if they announce that they have a practice for vaccine injured. There's seemingly nothing wrong. I mean, any vaccine, you're going to get some injuries. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's any medicine has side effects. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
so it's this environment that we're in right now is pretty crazy.
Yes. No, it is. It is. It is unprecedented. I mean, this is an amazing service you're doing for the public. That it's very highly commendable.
Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just personally speaking, have you yourself had any sort of backlash from what you're doing? And would you care to discuss any of that?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I think that we've had this topic has been very divisive. I'm very pro vaccine, very pro pharma. I mean, I've worked with the pharma industry. I understand the value that a lot of these therapies are bringing, these innovations are bringing.
Yes.
But I'm also critical, right? And what's really surprised me is how the politicization of this whole thing, where if in the United States, if you talk about ivermectin, for example, which hasn't been proven to work, but there's a lot of data that it shows that it may help, especially in combination with other things. But people look at you like you're crazy. So I have had in my own family, for example, if I express something critical about the vaccine, I mean, I'm not saying I don't think we shouldn't have the vaccines. We've been pro-vaccine at Trial Site, but we also talk about issues that emerge. And I have from family members been, critiqued, saying, hey, how can you say something negative about something that's so good, right? And my point is, hey, we're just reporting the truth, whatever that is. If there's a study that shows that there's myocarditis, well, we talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. And essentially you're showing the whole story, not just the select sort of, sanitized version, so to speak. You're showing the whole
story. On the other hand, on the other side, Sonia, we get people mad at us who are anti-vaccine if we report, hey, in some cases the vaccine might be beneficial. Then people get irritated at us for saying, well, how could you say that? Well, that's what the data says, right? So we try to report on what the data says. We're not perfect, and we do have opinions out there of different writers and experts that have their opinions, and we let them express their opinions. And we do have these fact check organizations that approach us and tell us very aggressively, take down those opinions, they're wrong. And we tell them, well, they're opinions, and we're open to other opinions, that support a contrary point of view. So we think that scientific debate and even dissension is important.
Who do you think is behind these fact check groups?
We think that they're they're organizations, companies that are ex-media executives
Right.
that organize these companies that then get contracts with the media companies or the tech companies or maybe even government. And it's sort of a racket because they'll approach you and they'll tell you what's wrong and what's false without even having a debate.
And it's what
And
they consider is false, right? In their
sorry,
opinion. It's
yeah,
what they consider, not
exactly.
what, yeah, the actual science is telling us.
And then they have a service to help you fix it. So if you pay them, then they can help you. So you can see it's almost like a sort of media mafia at work.
Yeah, I think that's a very apt term you just used, a
Yeah.
mafia sort of syndicate, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. So that's who's behind it. It's about money and power. It's
yes.
about because if you have a media company and you are losing readership and viewership, you got a problem. You
Well, I
get
mean, CNN is having that problem, right?
CNN has a big problem. Their ratings are way down. The only mainstream media that's up, I think, is Fox, because Fox, although I personally believe they're sort of a controlled opposition, they do at least provide a little bit more
Yeah.
flexibility to talk about alternatives, views of what's going on.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely. I mean, you've got the rise of GB News here in the UK.
TV
You've
news.
sort of, and that's come out from all this sort of, obviously the BBC. You know, many people believe that's sort of, government propaganda. It's funded by it's funded by license payers, but through, the government is centrally involved in that organization. And as we know, they helm the Trusted News Initiative. It's helmed by the BBC. So it
But I
is,
want you to think about this, Sonia. Sorry to interrupt, but like you're writing, you've done some investigative journalism, controversial, right? Right? The interpretation. GB News had you on. I mean, that's unprecedented. That there are opportunities. See, that's the good news in all of this
yes,
is that new media, new journalists have an opportunity to impact and access vast numbers of people. That's what makes me excited about all this
yes,
is is that there is a kind of revolution in communications.
yes.
And
I
there's a natural resistance to it. I mean, anybody that's sitting on top of a monopoly or oligopoly or what have you, they naturally don't want to give that up. It's a natural human
yeah.
resistance. If somebody's wiring your bank account lots of money and all of a sudden it's less and less and less, you're like, hey, what's going on here?
Yes. What do you see as the future for biomedical research, science in general? Just with the way the whole COVID-19 narrative has unfolded and this sort of clamping down, this really rise of this sort of blatant censorship and targeting any dissenting voices. It's interesting. We talked about this proliferation of other independent media groups coming out of this, but what do you see sort of looking to the future? And obviously with Trial Site News, how are Trial Site News? Where do you see your company in the future?
So I think it's a great question, and it's hard for me to predict what's going to happen. I
Sure.
like to try to be optimistic. I personally think, Sonia, that the concept of health is going to get more politicized. It's a struggle, it's a battle over health and how to monetize because we live in a capitalist society. So there's pressure to generate revenues and growth. And health is sort of a major frontier, right? So in that process. So I think that um, incredible innovation will continue to happen. Okay. I think, again, COVID, there's some amazing things that have happened in research. And I think there will also be more politicization and health communication strategies that get more and more sophisticated around the development of medicine. So, in other words, science, marketing, scientific communications, lobbying, all of it's going to become more important. On the trial side, we're going where there's a need, and I believe there's a real need for people to engage and communicate, connect, engage. And the current media, social network constructs out there don't do a very good job. Twitter is very much, individual centric and for celebrities and for, top, it's a pyramid, right? And there's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah.
So
there's lots of bots. We know there's lots of bots, lots of fake accounts.
Fake, lots of noise. So, how successful we'll be, we'll see. But we do have an environment now for people to come together, set up groups, communicate with each other, not worry about being censored. They can request research from the media side. So what social media do you know of where you can, as a group, go to the social media company and say, hey, we would like more summaries of research in this area to help us in our patient group. Mm-hmm. So like Facebook, the problem with the news is that it literally is developed by algorithms. It's influenced by algorithms, and it's meant to create tension and conflict because that drives fascination. I mean, it's very insidious, Facebook. So maybe I'm naive, and maybe that's what people want, and maybe our effort, won't be enough, but we'll give it a shot.
I mean, essentially what you're saying, you are the platform that actually listens to real humans, right? I mean, yes. You're not run by algorithms and computers. You're actually listening to the public, and yes. You are sort of maneuvering and moving, evolving through that because of what the public wants by listening to them. I think that's right. A really crucial point there that you've made. And yes, it's I mean, personally, I just think the censorship is just going to get worse and worse, but perhaps maybe out of that, more people will wake up and realize that they need to go to alternative platforms to get their transparent news and platforms like Trial Site News.
And, and the Substacks and everything else. I mean, if you think about it, you have to, for your own health, Sonia, you have to wake up. One thing we've learned from COVID, and we've written about in Trial Site before COVID, we have a epidemic of obesity and other issues in the United States. It's impacted by things like the social determinants of health. If you're born in a lower income family, there has to be a enlightenment around healthcare, and we have to move from what is a sick care system today that makes lots of money to a true healthcare system that's much more proactive and anticipates problems. This is what this is about.
Right.
That will cost the system lots of money because there's enormous profits that are being made now on the sick care system, but the health and productivity of the society in the future will be far greater if people wake up, if they take control of their own healthcare, make better decisions informed on the actual facts on the ground. Okay. And this goes from everything of how you eat, how you treat yourself, how you care for yourself. Yeah. I mean, these are things that we're going to write more about, by the way, more healthy living research.
More holistic.
More holistic. Yeah. Holistic is sort of a loaded term, but definitely you're right. I mean, and there's research behind all of this, right? And we want to be able to expand from just pure medical research to also, healthy lifestyle research, nutrition, everything like that.
Do you feel there has been essentially a loss of trust people feel towards the pharmaceutical industry? Do you think there's this, obviously we've had the Brooke Jackson, the whistleblower, she sort of blowing up what's gone on with the Pfizer's own clinical trials, and that's been documented. And have you noticed this sort of loss of trust and is sort of the pharmaceutical industry sort of floundering a bit? How are they going to regain that trust, considering what's gone on? And obviously from a regulator's point of view, I mean, there's been a lot of scandal with the FDA, the CDC, MHRA in the UK as well. Where do you see it going for those sort of key regulators as well? And obviously, you know, they're tied, as we know, with the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sonia. So definitely this experience with COVID, I believe personally, based on what I have observed through the lens of trial site, that the population's trust in the pharmaceutical industry has significantly waned, has been has lowered overall trust levels, because obviously there have been a lot of issues that have emerged: the censorship, you know, the misinformation, the coziness between government and industry. There's a lot of distrust out there, and I think it was before, but I think it's much more now. At least that's what it feels like.